All right. And I think it's time to get started. So again, thank you so much for being here today. Um, I'm super happy that we're back after the summer break with Revolutionizing Healthcare. Today we're going to have a core concept session on no-code copilots to build AI-enabled clinical tools. And I'm super happy to be leading the session together with Professor Mihaela van der Schaar. And we have a lot of amazing guests lined up for you as well, and I will introduce them in just a minute. Before we get to that, this session is going to run for 1 hour, as always, and it's going to be structured into the following parts. After this general introduction, which we're already in, Mihaela is going to introduce her vision for copilots. Then we're going to have Dr. Anders Boyd talk about one specific copilot, which is called Climb-DC, followed by Dr. Callender, who's going to talk about Syncraft, another copilot that has different capabilities. Then we're going to do a bit of an interactive thing with you, the audience, where you can sort of tell us about your vision for copilots. And after that, we'll talk about copilot needs with Professor McKinney, Professor Niemann, and Dr. Montagna. You can ask questions throughout the session, as always, in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll post them to the panel when appropriate. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. Today, we're really glad to be joined by 5 amazing people, the first of whom is Dr. Tom Callender, a clinical research fellow at the Department of Public Health and Primary Care at Cambridge, and a consultant in public health medicine, and he's also faculty at the CCAIM. Then we're super happy to be joined by Dr. Anders Boyd, who's a team lead in biostatistics at Inselgruppe in Bern, at Bern University Hospital, and he's also affiliated with Amsterdam UMC. Next, I'm happy to introduce Professor Eoin McKinney to you, who's a professor in the Department of Medicine at Cambridge and a consultant in nephrology and transplantation, also CCAM faculty. And then we're really glad to be joined by Professor Carsten Utoft Niemann, who's a associate professor at Rigshospitalet in Copenhagen and a consultant in internal medicine. And last but not least, let me introduce you to Dr. Marco Montagna, who's a doctor of internal medicine in Milan and also a PhD candidate in experimental and clinical medicine and a visiting researcher at Cambridge. Thank you all so much for being here today. And with that, let me hand it over to Mihaela.
I'm quite excited about the session that we are having today because I'm going to talk together with the various speakers and panelists today about how AI copilots can help you, clinical researchers, design the future of healthcare, and how hopefully with these new advances we have in large language models, Gen AI, we can build copilots without the need to code, which would allow clinical researchers and clinicians that are interested to build analytics in the driver's seat of really building and reshaping healthcare using AI. For a long time, there has been a big debate whether AI will replace clinicians, and as very many of you know, there have been a tremendous amount of discussion about what the role of the clinicians will be in the future. One particular response to this race of artificial intelligence came from Professor Eric Topol, who believes that as artificial intelligence is progressing, finally clinicians can focus on the task of really spending more time dialoguing with patients and in the care seat. I subscribe to that vision, but I also believe that there is an opportunity for clinicians and clinical researchers to move medicine from what I call an art to a science, paraphrasing Osler. And as I often said, I would not like to move into a plane which doesn't have a pilot, but also doesn't have instrumentation. In a similar way, I really hope as a patient that in the future I will not have in front of me only a clinician, but also technology that's at the cutting edge that will enable this clinician to really drive my healthcare using the best of tools. And you see here our collaborator McKinney, who will talk later, really discussing in a session quite a few years back a copilot that we have co-developed together with him. And at that time, it was very difficult to build such tools, partially because we needed a lot of dialogue between the clinical world, in which Eoin is part of, and our world of machine learning, where we have only limited knowledge about your clinical needs. And if it is to build this AI-empowered clinical ecosystem, we really need to enable you, the clinicians and the clinical researchers, to build analytics you feel are useful for yourself and for your patients. And because each one of you is in a different healthcare system, you see different types of patients, and your patients may have different needs, there is not a magic bullet. Different types of analytics may be useful to empower your research, but also your delivery of healthcare for the patients in front of you. When I started this agenda around 8+ years ago, we already were struggling with the fact that there are many tasks, many clinical tasks that you may want to build machine learning based analytics for. There may be a large amount of data and various needs, and all of that may be changing. And hence, what machine learning model is best for that particular type of data may be different. Hence, what we proposed at the time was to let machine learning do the crafting of machine learning models to address these various data sets and various needs. And the way to do that is this concept called automated machine learning, whose goal is not to automate clinicians, but rather to automate, if you like, the machine learning researcher, by enabling machine learning itself to select models, to build models, to combine models. And in around 2017, we started to build these automated machine learning models for clinical risk prediction that were interpretable. And the first work in this, let's say, string of works was done together with my former student, who is very much still active in this area, Mihaela, with whom we built autoprognosis for building such clinical risk scores. And this automated framework was built to have to ingest a large variety of data sets and build risk prediction scores that are interpretable, thereby, if you like, lowering the bar in terms of enabling clinical researchers who were able to code to engage with cutting-edge AI. Then we followed with an advancement on top of autoprognosis, of the original autoprognosis, by collaborating with Dr. Eoin McKinney, and we enhanced autoprognosis to allow for a larger amount of data processing tools, classification and regression tools, as well as interpretability tools. And encouraged, if you like, by these advances, I then joined forces with Dr. Tom Callender, who is also part of this session today, to write, if you like, a little manifesto to encourage clinicians and medical researchers to view automated machine learning as a partner for them to build analytics. And the reason we were so excited about that is because AutoML provides us with the ability to build scores that are built on underlying cutting-edge machine learning models, to be able to have these methods be interpretable and also reproducible, which is not always the case when you see clinical scores that are developed currently in the literature, even in the medical literature. Often these scores may or may not be interpretable, and also the methods that have been used to build them are not always available in the open source. However, while we were very enthusiastic about this, we still saw that there are remaining challenges. And one of them is that in order to engage with these AutoML tools, and many of you in the audience who are revolutionary clinicians have engaged with autoprognosis or with other type of automated machine learning tools, still that require you to learn to code. And most clinicians and clinical researchers do not code. Also, another challenge was that the data that needed to be ingested by tools like this needed to be of relatively high quality. And if the data sets that you have were not of sufficient high quality, these methods at times struggled. Also, it requires a quite good understanding of the underlying methods that were underneath this type of automated machine learning pipelines. And often a lot of back and forth was needed between you, the clinical researchers, and us to develop this type of analytics. So what has changed? What has changed in the last couple of years with the advancements of Gen AI and large language models is that now we can build no-code copilots, which can enable you, the revolutionary clinicians, to engage with a large number of machine learning and statistical tools using natural language without the need to code. It's important at this stage to say that this type of no-code copilots have a user interface that's similar to that of large language models such as ChatGPT or Gemini, but they are not just ChatGPT. Many of these copilots have underneath state-of-the-art machine learning tools, statistical tools, data analysis tools that can be embedded in these copilots and can be invoked by the clinical researcher, thereby making sure that there is no hallucination, and also the reasoning underlying these copilots is very carefully constructed, thereby helping the clinicians in their analysis of the data. So I'm going to try to provide a definition to these no-code clinical copilots, and I'm going to say that a no-code clinical copilot is, in my view, an intelligent assistant that empowers clinical researchers and more generally clinicians that are interested in building such tools to design and run data analysis, to explore clinical data, to improve clinical data, as well as to build machine learning and statistical analysis, for instance, for predictive modeling and clinical risk prediction, without writing a single line of code. Now, these clinical copilots will turn complex machine learning workflows into intuitive guided steps so that clinicians can really build their own analytics depending on the data they have, but also for the goals and the needs they have. So such copilots are, I would say, exciting because they can abstract away the need for programming, but also the need to engage with the data tools and the machine learning tools. You still need to engage with them at the conceptual level, but not really in developing the code or dealing with the code associated with them, because they provide automated data handling, but also model selection, validation, and interpretation. And unlike the AutoML tools that we described before, like the autoprognosis tools, this is now, this interaction is not with a Python code, but rather with natural language. And the underlying tools that, for instance, a method like autoprognosis has are really embedded within this copilot. And you will see a few examples later today when we are going to talk about Climb-DC or Syncraft. And these no-code copilots can enable building custom analytics by removing coding barriers, but also enabling you, even if you are not interested to build this custom analytics, to visualize data, to explore the data, to improve the quality of the data, and then apply either machine learning or statistical tools, thereby being able to address specific clinical questions and needs. We have worked in the last 9 months to build several exemplar copilots. We started with Climb, which we co-developed together with two clinicians, Tim Schubert, as well as Vasilis. And more recently, we advanced into Climb-DC, which will be presented by Anders, and then later we will also highlight to you our excitement for building a copilot for synthetic data together with Tom. Also in the pipeline is a copilot for causality and causal effect inference, thereby enabling the clinicians that are interested in understanding what treatments are best for what type of patients to really interact with these causality tools without the need to code. Future plans are to build copilots for digital twins, for time series analysis, but also to improve logistics and scheduling in the clinic. At this stage, I'd like to say that our goal is to build exemplary versions of these copilots, to provide open source solutions for these copilots, but our aim is not to build product level copilots. In our lab, we are not able to do so. We do not have the manpower and the capability to do that, but we hope that by open sourcing these incipient versions of these copilots, the community at large can take some of these initial attempts and bring them to the next level. I'd like to finish by saying that I really hope that these copilots may open a new era in medicine because they enable democratizing medical AI, enabling clinical researchers that want to really engage with these tools to harness the power of machine learning to build their own clinical tools. And by bridging clinical reasoning with these ML tools, the copilots may enable different clinicians to personalize, and the word personalize here is not personalized to the patient, but rather personalized to the clinician and their needs, trustworthy and scalable AI that can empower them to do risk prediction, but also to do better decision making. And what's exciting about this is that this can be done not only for one clinician for their particular set of patients and data, but this can become shared solutions where multiple clinical colleagues worldwide could come together to bring their expertise and co-develop and enhance these tools using these open source platforms. So I'm very excited about these no-code copilots and what they can enable to really transform medicine into a more quantitative and data-driven discipline. Thanks a lot. And I look forward to hearing from all of you about your vision with respect to these copilots and what they can bring.
Thank you so much, Mihaela. And I think before we go further into the discussion, let's hear about like 2 concrete examples of copilots that the lab has built. And Anders, the stage is yours.
Lovely introduction, and also the introduction on Copilots itself. What I want to do is just give a very quick, I guess, snippet of what it is that we're doing specifically with Climb-DC. And Climb-DC really is devoted to, I guess, this more machine learning model aspect and artificial intelligence aspect there. And before I want to begin, I really want to, as a biostatistician, I like to think of this in terms of what is the healthcare research flow? How does this happen, really? And usually for me, I have a clinician or this sort of the clinical actor that's a healthcare research that comes with diverse backgrounds, with diverse statistical knowledge, but they all really have some sort of desire to have a more detailed understanding of the research question. And so what do is they bring to the table, they bring their specific data, they have a research question, they have motivation to figure out what's going on. And I, as the biostatistician, has to come in and help trying to translate this type of research question into statistical terms. And I can do that through a bunch of data management techniques and statistical analysis techniques. But the problem with both the data management aspects and the statistical aspects is that they really take a lot of different time that I really don't have. And the French have a really nice word for this called chronophage. It's just, for me, it's a good description of how I feel when I'm doing these types of tasks. But then, if I look at all these various actors, there seems to be a type of need for assistance in an AI assistance. But the first question is, from a programming perspective, from a statistical analysis perspective, who needs this type of assistance? Well, you have the people that are kind of highly skilled, let's just say, or someone that can be completely self-sufficient in doing their own data analysis and analysis pipelines. And there's usually people that are, the data scientists and biostatisticians. But sometimes if you take away the biostatistician, like if you bring in the epidemiologist, for example, they probably have a different set of skills, but they might not really, need the programming skills that they probably don't really need extensive amount of programming help with their tools. If we look at someone like a biologist or maybe a biochemist, sometimes what happens is that they don't have a lot of background that allows them to use the pipelines of statistical analysis or machine learning to accelerate their research. And so really, if you look from a programming more statistical aspect, the need for the Copilot seems greater in those that are in the biological sciences. And but this, of course, it doesn't mean that all biologists don't need this. It's just that there's probably a greater need for these individuals if we look at from that specific perspective. But then I think to myself as well, it's not really a question of the need for this Copilot with respect to programming. It's really how can this Copilot help us bring in all these types of AI methodologies? Because this is where the real problem is. There are just a lot of different methodologies that are available today. And even from the biologist, even from the biostatistician, it's incredibly complicated to navigate the types of machine learning tools that are available. And these tools are available through all sorts of different pipelines in the analytical process. You can think of data imputation or feature processes. These are types of more what we call data-centric applications. There's a multitude of different methods available. You also have more of these data analytic applications that look at various aspects of the prediction or calibration pipelines. And so one of the things, it's great to have all these different types of modalities, methods, and case uses, but really at the end of the day, what gets complicated is it's really hard to understand which tools and models I should be using. And can I compare these models? It really gets quite confusing. So Mihaela already talked about this, but there have been, there's been multiple advances to get this much more, this cacophony really of different methods together. One, of course, is AutoML, which you just described earlier, and also autoprognosis, which is on its second version. These are all great advances in the field, but once again, these tools could be made to be a little more user-friendly. And so this is where the Copilot Climb-DC comes in handy. What this Copilot does is it essentially combines these types of data-centric and analytic-centric AI tools using an LLM-driven reasoning agent. And what it does is that with these types of statistical and machine learning models, it helps with the interpretability, it helps with visualization, so that this analytic pipeline for use with AI is streamlined through the clinician, or essentially a human in the loop. And we recently to the best of my knowledge, we recently published this in the article down below. You can go ahead and take a look at this. And how this pipeline works exactly is that you have different sources of data. So it could be your local data sets, for example. It could be public or non-public data sets, or even you can incorporate study level data. You can bring this into the interface and communicate with this interface with natural communication through like a toolbox. And then from there, you can do various aspects of data management. You can even do simple data description analysis, or even generate different types of reports that will help you and assist you in interpreting your data analysis. What this looks like exactly is that you have this Climb-DC interface where you have a type of session management toolbar, which allows you to figure out kind of what you're doing, essentially. You then have a session dashboard, which gives you all the types of components for a working directory, looking at different types of dynamic project plans, even looking at tracing your data tracking. And you even have the specific spot where you can actually put in the questions and your needs, which is prompted by the reasoning agent, which allows you to understand more what types of analysis you need to be doing. And then finally, we have also a session record, which gives you the diagrams that you need. It also can generate the Python code that you could use if you want to copy and paste and then redact it however you see fit. And there is an extensive, I would say tutorial, but a showcase of this at a previous Revolutionary Healthcare seminar. And I would invite you all, if you want to look more about this, to go to that session. I think it's on YouTube. And what's great about Climb-DC is the fact that you have the classic things that you see in a normal statistical analysis plan. You have data management aspects, you have describing the data, which is this classic table one, and you have statistical analysis. But what you see here in this table is that you have the classic methods, the classic things that anyone can do. But you also have these other advances, other techniques that are really AI machine learning based. Missing data imputation. There's a lot of great models that are available now for machine learning. In terms of statistical analysis, or even analysis in general, you can even look at featured importance plots. You can compare different model performances with different AI models. This all really brings together a comprehensive analytical tool set that allows you to more easily do your statistical analysis. There's also many other different options and many different types of things you can add to this. We have various aspects with more aspects of data management that are also available with Climb-DC. There's also a whole different statistical analysis tools that we also have there, looking specifically at subgroup challenges, data shifts, and data imbalances, things that are very specific to AI or machine learning models. And what I would like to address here is that others can incorporate some of the tools that they have built themselves into this Copilot itself. And as Mihaela already mentioned, there's also future plans to enhance this experience through the profiles of different Copilots. So it can be used, for example, for the specific biostatistician, but maybe there's a type of interface that would be more adapted to someone that's more a biologist, biochemist, or maybe even epidemiologist. And with that, I'd like to thank all the people that have really contributed to this project. It's been a very nice project to work with, and also our funders. And
gave us sort of a good impression of the first Copilot that we saw in action, and the second one would be Syncraft. So I'm going to invite Tom to speak to us about that.
So I will, whilst Tim gets those up quickly, I'll just take you through Syncraft. So analogous to what Anders was talking about, and Anders was heavily involved in Syncraft as well. We wanted to tackle one of the complex issues of how do you synthetic data, and synthetic data is notoriously hard to develop for non-specialists. Not only is it a complicated thing to get your head around at the best of times, but there's lots and lots of different methods that you can use, and there's no specific method that works brilliantly in all different use cases. And so this is one of the things we want to tackle. Now Tim's brought this up, I'm going to shuffle back one step. So the kind of reason why I'm interested in all of this, so if you go back to where you were, is that, and some will have heard this before, I think these Copilots are really valuable because most of what we do in life science R&D is done badly, if we're honest. And this was something that was picked up in a series of papers back in 2014 from John Ioannidis and colleagues across the world, of how most findings are not replicable. And often you find that papers where something looks brilliant in the original paper, but you just can't get it to be as good in future papers. That could be a risk prediction model, it could be synthetic data, it doesn't really matter. And so if we move on to the next bit, the way that we've been dealing with this within the medical community is to focus on guidelines and education. And I frankly just don't think that that is enough. If we consider what we've done since that paper was published in 2014, there's been a massive proliferation of guidelines. Most of these come as reporting guidelines, checklists, that kind of thing. And there was a paper in BMJ Open actually by one of the groups that actually created the tripod one in prediction models, which essentially showed that there was no improvement in the quality of these models before and after these guidelines. In other words, this just doesn't seem to work, but we've had a massive proliferation of them. So if you go on the Equator network, there are 676 reporting guidelines at the moment. And so it becomes an impenetrable forest for researchers to wade through. And with these kind of Copilots, we can encode good practice. So if we move on, this is what we've done with Syncraft. Syncraft takes you through the different stages required to build synthetic data to state-of-the-art standards. And we've shown how you can use this across genomic data sets, a large epidemiological data set, and how the synthetic data that it produces is as good as you would have done if you'd done it both manually, but also the synthetic data itself is good enough that you can use this for other tasks. So it can be used for data access, if that's what you're interested in. It can be used for data augmentation. That's where you deal with some of the imbalances you might find in a data set. And if you move on one more slide, I thought I would just put this in from our paper on this, and it gives you a little bit of a background of what it actually is doing. So Syncraft, the kind of Copilot, uses a combination of different LLM agents working together with memory so that it can take you through different steps. Now, many of the steps involved in research to a human don't seem that complicated. You might do a little bit of data preparation, analysis. There's a little bit of back and forwards as you go through that process. But when you actually have to encode some of this, you find that there are lots and lots of different steps. And at each point, the actions that you take have knock-on impacts throughout the entirety of your pipeline. This is relatively complex to do. It's not something that you can do with a pure LLM like ChatGPT on its own. That's one of the reasons why we need to build specific copilots and put together these kind of frameworks to be able to drive this research agenda forwards. And so what you see in the second, the B slide, is that B figure, is that at each step, there is an action that can be taken. This can lead to feedback to the system. And this allows the system to sequentially move through the stages of building synthetic data, evaluating it comprehensively. And at each stage, things that may crop up could lead you to having to progress back to an earlier point and then having to change what goes on. This is something that we would do all the time in analytics, but through this, you can make it an explicit point, and at the very end of it, you can come out with a report that shows exactly what has happened. So you can build something that is completely transparent. And I'll just quickly end on the last bit, which is that as Climb-DC and the other tools, this is all available online and it's open source. This is the GitHub repo, and then the preprint is available there as well for those who are interested.
Before we move on, we're gonna have a brief audience poll, and basically, let me preface this by saying Mihaela has introduced this vision of copilots that's mostly focused on risk prediction, predictive modeling, synthetic data, and I think that one could think about lots of other potential copilots as well. So like I just came up with a few of them on the fly, but you could think about having a copilot for admin tasks, right? For meeting summaries, whatever. Those sort of already exist, just not as much in medicine. Then you could have copilots for planning hospital operations, for reviewing guidelines to help patients adhere to medication, for teaching medical students, all sorts of things. And we're gonna give you the chance to sort of make your voice heard in just a second in this poll that you should see now. And there's a few questions we're asking. One of them is like, which tasks would you feel comfortable using a copilot for? Which capabilities would you need to have? What kind of copilots do you want to have? And so on. And I'll let you go through the poll for 2 minutes, and then we're sort of going to summarize what everyone thinks. Okay, you should see those now, but I'll also walk you through them. So most people would actually be comfortable using a copilot for literature review, and I guess that many people sort of already use some of the LLMs that are out there for that. Less so for clinical decision support. Then in terms of capabilities, it seems like integration into existing EHR systems is very important to participants. And in terms of like having one or many smaller copilots, people are leaning more toward task-specific copilots. In terms of informing patients, most people think that patients should always be informed when copilots are used in their treatment planning or anything like that. And people would like to see more research copilots, so it seems like the lab is moving in the right direction there. Mihaela, if you would like to comment on that, feel free to jump in. Otherwise,
No, I
I'd say,
think it's better to have Eoin, Carsten, and Marco presenting their points of view, and then we can discuss.
perfect. I think that sounds good. So, yeah, I'm happy to continue with that, and I would hand over to Eoin first for your comments. Not only on the poll, but more generally.
Sorry, yes, thanks very much. You can hear me okay?
Yes, that's great.
So the poll's interesting. We're clearly preaching to the converted here. Many of you are very happy to use LLMs in the context of clinical care straight away. I would concede to initially having been a bit more skeptical about their application, but, and this is the important bit, I have test driven them now. I've test driven DC Climb in collaboration with Mihaela's lab, and I should sort of describe that experience to you. My skepticism comes from the fact that I think it's potential that we get one step removed from the data and we don't see the code and we don't know what we're doing. And if we don't know what we're doing, it's hard to understand the results. But I was refreshingly surprised by actually using the Copilot, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Firstly, the skills that are described as necessary in medicine, the data science, the biology, the clinical aspects, they are very rarely found in one individual, and therefore collaboration is essential. And facilitating that is hugely important and really could change things massively. So there's a lot of potential for copilots. My skepticism really came from the idea that these were no code, that actually I could have a large language model doing things for me that I didn't know what it was doing. And it was only really when we used it that we could see that it is no code in the sense that you don't need to write the code, but it's not no code in the sense that you don't see the code. It is very transparent, and this is where my skepticism was actually addressed. You can see exactly what it's doing at every step. Not only that, but it will output and write explicitly the code that has been used. So it isn't the case that you're interacting with an LLM that will go off and do something and give you a result and you don't really know how it got there and you have to take it on trust. It's not that. It's very transparent and it will give you the exact code that's been used the whole way through. So I don't think that's a problem. So it is genuinely democratic in terms of providing access. It's very transparent in that you can certainly see everything from that respect as well. Does take that everything through step by step. So you go piece by piece by piece and can review it or dig into it at any stage that you want. And this, I think, really does make one of my concerns was maybe this made things less, not more reproducible because you're not in control or able to see exactly what's going on. It isn't. It really does make things more reproducible and it's extremely transparent indeed. Um, I suppose a slight caveat is that it does show you the code, but that's only helpful if you don't if you understand what the code is actually doing. So it's the code is there for anyone to review and therefore extremely helpful. Direct experience of DC Climb on a data set that we provided, real world data set, not a pre-cleaned toy dummy data set. It was very quick, despite it being a comparatively large data set, and allowed us to pre-process and QC data very quickly in an interactive way where its understanding of the data actually seemed to be one step ahead of ours. Its accuracy was really quite impressive in picking out the data fields, annotating the data fields, and helping us to do data wrangling tasks before you even plug it into a model. That sort of data wrangling is facilitated. That takes a lot of experience and time with coding, and this facilitated that really well. It also identified errors in our data. I confess, when we provided the data for the Copilot test, we'd done so reasonably quickly. We had to get this together. We did the test, and there were errors in our data that I hadn't actually realized they were there. It wasn't a data set that we'd published on or you actually used in Anger. It was a test set we were using, but it was real data. There were some errors in there that had been generated just as part of the process of carving out a data set for use in the example. And the process identified those really quickly and helped us to clean it to an extent that would have been hard to do otherwise. So the complex formatting we provided, it handled beautifully, understood, and could process very easily. Interacting with it was very easy. Um, it also did things that I don't routinely do, and that included testing the system for processing capacity and memory access. So, for example, at an early stage, it was saying, do you have enough memory for this process? Would you like me to check your processes? It therefore did so and said, no, you're fine to go ahead with your local system, or you need to plug into the HPC or spin up some more virtual machines to undertake a process of this stage, of this scale. So it was very helpful in that respect. Also, I think one thing that hasn't been highlighted, but is a useful feature of DC Climb is very explicit about privacy, where your data goes, how your data interacts with any LLM externally. And I believe it all remains on the local server and other messages are sent backwards and forwards. And there's a lot of documentation about that on the GitHub pages. So overall, my experience of it, despite initial skepticism about the fact that it might make things less transparent, not at all, very transparent. And I think this genuinely would make coding accessible to people who are in a very useful way to people who are not familiar with it. So I will stop there and pass over to, I think, Carsten. Obviously, happy to take questions about our specific experience, but
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you so much, Eoin. And I'll try to be the even more skeptical one. And I'll just use a few slides to kind of inform why I would still be quite skeptical after trying this. So first, I want actually to congratulate your team, Mihaela, on what a nice setup you did in terms of testing the Copilot. And I actually think it would work for some clinicians. But for me, working in a group, having access to Epic-based data, that's what you see here, registry data, all Danish data for patients with lymph node malignancies, laboratory results, but also biobank samples where we have additional molecular data, and mandatory quality databases where we actually see the outcomes evaluated for patients. And here I'm just illustrating how complex our data are, looking back 7 years prior to diagnosis, following here on the left in a swimmer's plot, 1,000 patients with CLL, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, seeing when they're admitted to hospital in blue, when they died in red, when they had an infection in green, if they received first-line treatment for the lymph node malignancy, had an ICU stay here in purple, if they had a secondary malignancy, if they received antibiotic treatment, what type of antibiotic treatment they received, antihypertensive treatment, opioid treatment, procedures like chest X-ray, CT scans, bone marrow biopsies, lumbar punctures. And this is actually the pattern I'm looking for as a clinician. So it's that major task I'm trying to put on Mihaela's group to actually be able to make a Copilot that would allow me to look for the patterns here and identify that as a predictor, where I need not only to see if a patient have a specific outcome here illustrated in terms of looking at patients with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, the major type of aggressive lymphoma, and looking whether the patient have a high risk or low risk of a specific outcome here, success of treatment after 2 years being alive without signs of lymphoma. And on the y-axis here, you see the low, low, intermediate, high, and high predictions on the current NCCN guidelines, IPI score, International Prognostic Index. And in the lower x-axis, you see the machine learning model we have developed. And you see it benchmarked in blue. You have patients with a successful outcome, in red patients who had a negative or failure outcome. And you'll see that we, all the way to the left between 0.0 and 0.1 in the x-axis, have identified the low-risk group, much more patients who have this specific outcome. And it's actually reported on the test set, the blinded test set that was not part of the training. So that's just emphasizing how much detail we need to go into if we actually want to develop truly data-driven models, and the way we need to visualize towards the clinicians what we see, and we need to understand as clinicians of these steps. So this is the task I put on you, and I want it in a way where I can use it operationally towards patients, explaining to them this specific patient, whether based on a specific type of lymphoma, here 9 different types of lymphoma, a specific age group, and a specific prognostic index. So the complex reality for physicians is not just having a simple data set. When we tested out our data set, I had reduced it to around 1,000 data points per patient. Actually, we have more than 3,000 data points, and lots of those are data series, so time series data, which we need to represent to the model, and the model could only handle 100 data points. And we need to develop into something we can really use in day-to-day clinic, and we need to deploy it here. An example how we deployed it into an Epic-based electronic health record system. So this is both demonstrating to you that we have the clinical environment in the middle. So to the right, we have the data window or mirroring of the data available in the clinical development. We deployed the predictive algorithm in there, and all the way to the left, we presented it to the clinician. So I'm not disencouraging what you're doing in terms of creating copilots, because we definitely need that. But there's so many steps needed before we can actually trust those and use them. So we need to have the clinician and the data scientists together, because it's not enough just to develop a quick and dirty, which is what I would consider the copilots here, prediction. We need to make sure we actually do the full life cycle of data-driven medicine. That means using complex and time series routine data to inform what we do. We can deploy simple and rule-based algorithms, but we need to have a fourth way of validating those, like we do in clinical trials for new medication. We need to address both the disease phenotype and patient factors to predict the outcomes. And sometimes you really need the complex algorithms, including much more than the 100 different variables, and including time variables. And it's only of interest to me, as I spent half my time in the clinic, if it's implementable data-driven hematology or medicine. And we need to make sure that we keep the data scientist and the clinician together in the same room, together with the co-pilot, together with whatever type of new model we need to develop. But I really want to encourage you, Mihaela, and your group and everyone here to continue this kind of communication and make sure we actually get all the way to what we can use in the clinic to benefit our patients, not just the quick and dirty models here. So that was kind of the critical perspective. Very happy to discuss it further.
Thank you so much. No, that was great and super helpful as perspective. And we have one final panelist who I'd like to invite to share his view as well, which is Dr. Montagna.
Okay. Do you see my presentation or my presenter view?
We see your presentation. It's great.
Okay. So I'm actually an internist, and therefore I'm dealing with complex patients, geriatric patients, patients with multiple diseases, which and who are often not included in clinical trials. So in my specialty, we have the problem of not doing really data-driven medicine because we don't have evidences about our patients. So what we are trying to do is trying to analyze our own data, the data we produce in our everyday practice in our clinic. But this is, as anticipated, real-world data, and this real-world data is often messy, full of mistakes, is very scattered, longitudinal, low quality, and complex in nature. I just wanted to show you our current pipeline. We are working on this internal medicine project. So we're gathering data from our internal medicine departments, laboratory data, therapy, imaging. We have our own case report form where we collect manually data from our patients. And so we have all different sources of data, even very large data sets. We have a lot of laboratory data, a lot of SQL tables in the case report form. And for each patient, we have the extraction of the therapy that the patient received during the admission. And so we have hundreds of admissions and hundreds of different Excel files with therapies. And I'm trying as a physician to approach the data science world and to tackle some of the our own research questions. And so I exposed myself to data science, to Python coding, to statistics, and I tried really to learn as much as possible. But I can tell you it was difficult. And I think if we want to really have more physicians joining the effort and joining this kind of talk between true data scientists, machine learners, and the clinical field, we need some kind of help to give some help to the clinicians. So I think copilots are really useful. If I had these copilots at the beginning of my PhD, I would have been really happy because I really found myself struggling in that complex scenario of many different pipelines, many different data manipulation techniques, data imputation techniques, machine learning models to be chosen, and then all the subsequent steps. And I think I also agree that these tools should be very explicit in the reasoning, because there is a generalized lack of trust by my colleagues. So there shouldn't be any behind the curtain actions. And I'm happy to hear from Professor McKinney that actually the models, the tools are very transparent, and that there are no data protection problems. So there is no data upload into the platforms. And I also anticipate, as I was mentioning, that there will be a low data science competence of users. We possibly anticipate that if you want to make this tool available to many different clinician users, most of them may have not very strong data science competence. So I actually like foster and ask to you that are developing these copilots to really implement the educational content. So to ask the models to be very explicit in the reasoning, very transparent, and somehow teach to the users what are we doing. So go hand by hand with us and carry us through the pipeline. I think this would be very interesting, especially for students. We have very low digital literature in general in medicine. So I think as a medical teacher, in this case, I'm talking about as a medical teacher, for our students moving and through all of these graphs and figures and tables can be very complex. And so I think having some educational copilot could be very interesting. This is my last piece of idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, yeah, I think even beyond that, that's a great point. These kind of copilots are generally LLM-enabled tools can sort of build bridges, right, between AI researchers and clinicians to help them understand the other field better and sort of act as translators. We have a couple of questions from the audience. These sessions always go by so fast, so we only have a few minutes left. But I don't want to leave these out. Joseph, if you want to ask your question first, I think that hasn't been answered in the chat yet. About
Yeah,
yes.
sorry, it's a very long question, so it might be controversial, but everything is being developed at a breakneck speed, and these efforts are laudable in terms of developing clinician-friendly AI tools, including the copilots. But clinicians have very limited time and mental acuity in some cases, and to use all these, you need time to learn and invest, and also sort of private quiet time, which is just simply not available in any healthcare system. So and these are sort of chronophage tasks as well in terms of upskilling yourself, and the community that uses AI or understands AI in medicine is quite small. So my question is that isn't there a danger that clinicians will start to disengage from this process, lose less AI tools, and sort of develop a bit of an averse position towards all this?
Thank you. Yeah, Owen, can I put you on the spot since you've used the copilots? Sort of, what do you think?
Sorry, I was just ruminating on one thing, which is that I think it's important to stress that because copilots are being used doesn't necessarily mean that that's quick and dirty analysis. I disagree. I don't think it is quick and dirty. I think it's making it accessible, but actually doing so in as good a way as you would have been doing without the copilot. So, for example, many of the algorithms, autoprognosis, SynCity, other things that you would already directly access with code, you would just access with an LLM in between, facilitating that interaction. So I don't think it is changing how robustly you're analyzing your data. That might not be an answer to the question you're asking.
No, I was because you're talking about data and sort of data research, but a lot of clinicians are rooted in clinical practice, and that's where they would like to see tools that really help them. But of course, they could be chronophage tasks. So you have this sort of a disconnect sometimes of you have to upskill yourself to be able to use all these tools appropriately and trust them and everything. But then the system that we work in just simply doesn't allow you to do that.
So anything used in a clinical system these days, you've got to make sure it's safe, make sure it preserves privacy, and actually make sure it improves your output. That's no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's particularly difficult to demonstrate an impact on what a clinician does, particularly for a copilot. So if you work with a copilot, what does it improve? What's the quantifiable output that is better? It can be a better way of working, but for you to prove that it's better might show that you're faster. And that's often what people try and do. And if it's faster, it saves the hospital time, it saves the hospital money. And that's true for linking copilots that might make you write better, quicker letters, or letters that are just as good. You just do it faster. But it's hard to quantify how good your letters are and therefore know that you're hitting the same bar. So those are unique considerations for application of copilots within a clinical setting. And I think the bar there is higher than it is for linking copilots in the context of undertaking research where things can be very, very transparent. And that's the lower hanging fruit in my mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I think, given that it's almost 5 o'clock, unfortunately, I think lots of questions have already been answered in the chat by our panel as well. So thank you so much for that. We've put a couple of links in there as well. And I would just like to ask each one of you to sort of leave us with one final hope for where you hope this field of building co-pilots for healthcare should be going in the future. And I'm going to start like we started the panel. Tom, if you would like to kick us off. Okay, you may have lost Tom. In that case, Eoin, can I? No, we have Tom. Yes.
Sorry, you haven't. You have. Sorry, my thing is dropping in and out. My internet's not great. Can you just repeat what you wanted me to do? Sorry.
Of course, of course. Can you give us a final hope for where you believe this field of building co-pilots for medicine should be going?
I sincerely think that within 5 to 10 years, we will do the majority of research using natural language interfaces. Now, that doesn't get rid of, as Eoin says, you need to be able to see what's happening underneath it. But I think that this will have a profound impact on the quality and reproducibility of research. That being said, there needs to be safeguards in it to ensure that what we're doing is actually correct, but also that we don't just get a proliferation of nonsense. And I think that actually LLMs can help with that. As Eoin said, some of these things can be used to support how you build more effective research, or to find errors, to suggest ways of doing things. And in a clinical context, I think that we are probably on the cusp of a revolution, particularly in autonomous and semi-autonomous AI, which could be considered in some respects as co-pilots. But I don't think we're even close to knowing how we manage that in reality. And I think that we will have to start to think of some of these things more like humans, and we will have to address their fitness to practice, because once you're having a conversation with these things, we can't control these things as they go into the real world. And I think that that is a profound shift in how we contemplate our relationship between in medicine, full stop, but also how we manage software.
Thank you. Then next one, Eoin, would you like to sort of give us your final words?
I'm going to keep it brief. Agree with everything Tom said. It's very hard because these tools are out there and people use them. But this helps you do things more easily in a robust way. In one sentence, I would invite anyone to have a go. I was skeptical until I tried it, and actually I was quite impressed.
Thank you. And then Professor Niemann, may I ask you also to share a final sentiment?
Thank you. So I would really love to keep the data scientist and the clinician in the same room for a very long time, to convince the data scientists, to convince Mihaela and her group that we need to fulfill the development, whether based on co-pilots or humans, to actually make this implementable for our patients. And that's really where I see the missing link. I saw the comments about the AI Act. To me, that's not the problem. Now we actually got the legal setting needed, because we also have the European health data space, even for UK inviting you in within the EU for that. And we have the opportunity to create these data that we can actually use to improve treatment options and individualization of treatment for our patients. But we need the patients from data scientists to stay in the room to face all the troubles from real data, not just using the available standardized data set, but make sure it's actually something we can use in the real world. So that's really the missing gap. I want to encourage you to keep working in this area, not just having an easy go at the no ribs. I know you might challenge me on making that the easy go, but I believe it's actually the easy go because it's just finishing a project, presenting it, and then leaving it there without benefiting the patient. So I really want to encourage you to take that step together with us clinicians.
Thank you so much. So yeah, another call for being reality centric. And then finally, Dr. Montagna, if you would like to share some final words.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on the effort to really utilize data that is coming directly from the hospitals and from clinics. So that is where the real challenge lies, because that is where real patients are treated, not just clinical trials. And then I would also push medical education to include digital health education, digital skills, because we need more and more physicians to be able to engage with these tools. So I hope universities will improve in this, and yeah, let's say we will be part of the change.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of you for being on the panel and to all the participants for asking great questions. It was a true pleasure. And I want to close by briefly showing you what's next for Revolutionizing Healthcare, which is going to be a session on the 22nd of October, same time. And the topic will be AI for oncology. This session will be up on YouTube soon, and of course, please spread the word and let others know about these sessions and have them join us. So thanks again for being here today. It was a true pleasure having you. Thank you.